Yeah.
Are you recording this?
Yes. I am. We are watching you chew right now.
Can I finish my bagel?
You can finish your bagel. You're just going to do it on camera.
I'm waiting for my brain to come into my body. I'm not normally this on at this time of the morning.
Look, it is 8:30 in the morning, and due to my good news, which I'll share with you in a moment, we've had to record this online. I wasn't able to make it to Melbourne. And I saw Carly come on still having her breakfast and thought, you know what, I'm going to hit record because that's the kind of guy I am, really, just the kind of guy I am.
I can't even open my mouth to rebut you. Are you a breakfast person?
Am I a breakfast? I do have breakfast. I have eggs every morning because I'm rich. If I won the lottery, there wouldn't be obvious signs. I wouldn't tell everybody. But you know what? If you saw my breakfast menu, you'd know that I must be doing all right because I have 5 eggs. 5 eggs for breakfast, which I think these days makes me a millionaire.
It does. I'm one of those people I have to eat in the morning. I don't know how people don't do breakfast. I feel like cognitively I struggle until I've had like a good dose of carbs. So
yeah, are you aware that cognitively you still struggle even after your good dose of carbs? Is that or
but at least that's hides a little bit of it.
Yeah. Oh, look, it improves. It definitely improves. No, look, I'm
with bad manners.
I'd like to say I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm actually enjoying this a little more than I should.
Look at my eyes. My eyes aren't even awake yet.
I've been up since 6. I woke up before my alarm. My alarm was set for 6. I get up in the morning. I make a coffee. I do some Bible reading, do some praying, and then I have my breakfast properly. And then I'm down here, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to start work. Usually before 8 o'clock today. I was a bit slow, and I waited till 8:15.
Right.
But the flip side is, though,
aren't you amazing?
You're still intelligent at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I have lost all of my IQ by about 9:30 at night. I have by then become the dumbest person on the planet. I cannot string a sentence together. So there is a sting in the tail.
Do you know what? Like, as a creative, I feel like I need to get all my work done through the day so I can have the night time to do my editing or my more creative stuff. And I actually really struggle. And I like being up in the morning, don't get me wrong, but I find by the time I get to the deep work stage of my night, I'm too tired. So it's sort of like I get up at 7. I'm not lazy, guys. I wake up at 7. But as far as like getting this all to work and function, I normally have gone for my walk and I haven't gone for my walk. And I haven't had my breakfast. Sorry. Anyway, enough annoying people with our habits. It is.
It is the Oddcast episode 20. It starts with a 2.
That had to make an appearance because it's special.
Well, that's right. And look, this has to make an appearance because I'm a grifter.
I just dropped it.
This is my contribution because I'm a grifter. Apparently. I found out recently that I actually work for the US government. I'm an intelligence asset for the US government. I found out recently.
How are you fitting that in between Mossad and ASIO? Come on
I
now. I think you're getting off a bit much.
No, what I do is I took the contract with Mossad first, obviously, because they're behind everything. We all know that. And then I realized I could sell the same information to all of the others. So just control C, control V, and just sort of, I just BCC them all into the same emails is all I do. And I'm on the payroll for all of them now.
It's smart business, to be fair.
It's
you don't want to put all your eggs in one pot.
Yeah. And that way, when
that blood money, that's
I figure, you get involved in this sort of work, sooner or later, they're going to try and kill you for one reason or another. And I figure I might as well just have all of them after me at once. And then I can end up like those really cool action movies where there's multiple different groups trying to kill the hero. And then the hero figures out how to make the groups fight each other instead. I'm trying to be like an action superhero. That's all I'm trying to do. Nothing, mate. Yeah.
You know what? I like to fly under the radar, and I figure you make good friends with the bad guys, and then life's all right. You got some people on your side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right. Friends in low places are often much more useful than friends in high ones. But I should explain why are we doing this. It is entirely my fault. So for those of you that love us being in the same room and having our little chit chats and our banter face to face, we actually like it better too. But unfortunately, due to me, I couldn't do it this week. But I'm going to make you all feel bad. I'm going to make you all feel bad for judging me. Because it's actually as part of a gift that I'm giving to my wife. I I know, right? This is my good news. My good news is my wife is having a pamper day. She's off shortly to actually, we kind of need to not be too long on the podcast because I need to look after the kids from mid-morning because she's going to go and spend, I think it's it's like 3.5 hours at the hairdresser. I booked her in.
That's a pretty normal sitting.
Yeah, well, so I'm told, but for me, this is mind blowing. It's sort of, if I'm more than 20 minutes in the chair, I think I assume that my hairdresser has probably had a heart attack and dropped dead if I'm still seated after 20 minutes. Like something's gone wrong. But apparently you girls will have them do like something to your hair and then you will sit there with aluminium foil in your hair for like a lifetime. And then eventually at some point after they've had a nap or something, the hairdresser is going to come back and take the aluminium out of your hair. I don't know. I don't get it. And then she's going to go and have a snack and something to eat. And then she's going to a massage place that's going to be like all fancy and stuff.
This sounds lovely.
I
know. My invite?
She has a pamper day organized today, or I organized for her a pamper day today. And I have to look after the kids in order to enable her to do that. So I wasn't able to make the trip to Melbourne this week. So that is why we are doing it this way. And I have hopefully successfully made you all feel terribly bad and guilty about the fact that you were judging me for not going to Melbourne for the podcast.
Gee, just when you're watching this, that sounds like a lovely idea.
Isn't it? Yeah? Isn't it, G? Yes. She should definitely do that for you. She should definitely organize a 3.5 hour hairdressing appointment for you. I think she's right. I think that's a great idea.
You know, I haven't been to an actual hairdresser in a very long time. I used to go a lot, but for that exact reason, it's 6 hours for me because I've got such long hair and I just can't, I can't handle it. I love my hairdresser. I love a chat, but at the 6 hour mark, I'm like, I'm ready to kill you. Let me up.
I love nothing more than a hairdresser and or a taxi or Uber driver or these sorts of people who never say a word. If you're an Uber driver and you want the maximum tip from me, say nothing. Don't say hello. Don't say goodbye. Don't say thank you. Don't talk to me. I'm not interested in the weather. You don't need to know where I'm coming from or what I'm doing today. Just silence, please.
I'm the opposite. I love having a good chat to my Uber driver.
I would pay extra. If there was a button I could push and pay extra for silence during a whether it's a massage or a hairdressing appointment or a taxi ride or whatever, I would pay extra for silence.
That's fair.
I would love it.
I've had some really good chats with like either Uber drivers or taxi drivers. Then they'll start talking like la 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 la. I almost went into an accent then. I was like, don't do that, Carly. That's bad.
Well, this is the funny thing. I actually I often do enjoy my chats when they happen. So I'm gonna not throw somebody under the bus here, but I had an Uber driver. I went to Queensland to do a podcast filming on Tuesday morning. So I went to Queensland on Monday and flew back on Tuesday. And one of my Uber drivers pulls up in a Mercedes GL just before they became the GLS. So this is the big Mercedes. SUV thing, not a car that an Uber driver typically is driving. My Uber driver going the other way was in a beat up Toyota Corolla, just for contrast. It's just
normally a Camry. That's what it normally is. A Camry.
Yeah, Camry. They're ubiquitous. But no, I got picked up from the airport in a beat up Toyota Corolla, and I got taken back to the airport in a very nice condition Mercedes GL. And so I talked to the driver because they're a nice vehicle, and I'm like, how do you make the numbers work driving a vehicle like this for Uber? Like, surely the depreciation alone is killing you, right? You're not making any money here. Turns out he was ex-aviation industry and was kind of just doing it to kill some time. He's an older sort of, I'm guessing he could retire if he wanted to, but didn't want to, kind of a person. And we had a lovely chat. It turns out he's actually a libertarian. He voted for the Libertarian Party and knows some of the people that I know, although he wasn't familiar with me or what I do. So we ended up having a lovely chat. So I'm with you. I get it.
He is now.
But I also would have paid extra to have never exchanged a word.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Should we get into the podcast?
Look, we probably should because we don't have forever today.
You haven't asked me my good news.
Well, what's your good news then?
Actually, I think you'll appreciate this. Next time you come down, you'll probably be like, oh, I'll just stay a little bit longer. So G is building an arcade game. And as he does, he just loves to build stuff. And he has found, again, guys, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just relaying what I have visually witnessed. But he has bought this like mini computer thing. It's literally like this big. It's tiny. And you can download every single like console game that's ever existed. So from Sega to Atari to Super Nintendo to Nintendo. and they're all on this like mini computer, like inside the computer. And he's bought this contraption that plugs it up to the TV for now. So we're playing with a PlayStation remote. We're playing Super Mario Brothers on our massive TV. And he's going to build it all into like a big arcade thing. And then upstairs, much to my dismay, the spare room is going to be turned into a 90s time capsule. And he is literally sourcing one of those 90s desks, you know, like with the veneer and there's the CD holders up the side that you put your massive CRT screen in the middle.
Yes. That is like my childhood come to life. I like the man. But listen, you said it's an entire. So when you say an arcade, I think of like one of the big floor standing things with the big joysticks and the massive buttons that you mash.
That's what he's building.
And you're telling me though that it's this big. And my question for you is, what is this? An arcade for ants? Like it needs to be at least 3 times that size.
I was like, what is this little thing? Like, do you remember you used to have like the big thing and then you put the cartridge in it, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And no, all of the games. I mean, you think about it, like the memory that requires and how fast, how technology is now. So he's already got them. It's like thousands of games are all on this like little itty bitty mini computer.
So I want to put something in perspective. We all kind of know there's a lot of power inside a phone, right? These things are absolutely incredible, absolute marvels. To put it in perspective, NASA, when they sent the moon mission, the Apollo missions, the entirety of NASA, all of those banks of computers combined, had less processing power and memory than a programmable VCR. You remember the old VCRs? You used to be able to set the time for them to start recording and stop recording and stuff, and they were impossible to use. They were like labyrinthine in their menu systems, and you just had to set it and just hope and pray that you got it right. And you'd get home and you'd try and replay the video, and you'd find out whether you'd screwed it up or not. One of those has more processing power than every single one of those NASA banks of computers had at the time. And so and then you think about how much more power this has compared to one of those. And then you think about the fact that you use that to play Super Mario Brothers, and you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself. Just disgraceful.
When was the last time you played Mario? When was the last time you played it?
Okay. Confession time. I've done basically exactly the same thing as what you're describing, G, doing, and what I'm currently judging you for, I have done. And I bought one of the little machines, the all-in-one machines as well, and I plugged it in, and I introduced my son to the original Super Mario Brothers, and he thought it was very unimpressive because he's played the newer ones, and he thinks they're much better. And of course, he's a heretic, so I've had to throw him in the bin, and we're going to make a new baby and replace him.
Over the balcony you go.
Broken. Yeah, he's obviously broken. So we did play it for a while, but being the cheap Chinese piece of crap that machine was, the cables in the controllers quickly started coming out and loose, and they unplugged themselves, and I don't know how to solder. I have a kit that I bought 20 years ago from Dick Smith Electronics. It was like a beginner's kit to teach yourself electronics and soldering, and I still have not opened it. It is still in a drawer unopened. And so as a result, once the controllers broke, once both of them were broken, the machine went in the bin, all $35 worth of it. So I've actually played the original Mario Brothers relatively recently. I loved it. I'm deeply nostalgic for it, but I'm still going to judge you.
Oh, it's actually really cool. But like, this is G's thing. He just gets an idea, he researches it, and then it gets built. And he's building
he does stuff well.
Yeah, he does. Well, he as he should. He builds race cars, but he's building a simulator as well. So like a car simulator. So upstairs is going to be a fun little space. So anyway, that's my good news.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're full of good news today. What are our stories?
All right. I've got them on my phone. Let me just pull them up for you. Speaking of efficiency, I don't know how I would ever cope if someone took this thing out of my hand. I really don't. Like, I can sit there in bed and plan our show notes, like delaying me getting out of bed because it's 0 degrees in Melbourne this morning. And so the entire show notes is in my phone right now. Yep. By the way, Melbourne is freaking freezing, just so everyone knows.
Don't care. Moved out. Bye.
Okay, so our list today, something that you probably know nothing about, but we have to talk about it, is the Sean Diddy Combs trial.
Oh, good. Yay.
Yeah. It's actually really perverse. It's pretty sick. I'm not going to talk about all the really interesting stuff, but yuck, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis and the cover-up.
Yes.
Lots to talk about there. James Comey's 8647 Instagram post.
Yes, that's a weird one.
Weird one from the former director of the FBI, yes. The disbanding of the National and Liberal Coalition.
Yes. I might have some goss there.
Excellent. The CFA tax levy protests in Victoria 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
The Victorian tax increases under Premier Jacinta Allan and the blowout that is ensuring. But apparently we're also going to have a surplus.
Yep. We simultaneously have increasing debt and a surplus at the same time. Truth is, what is it? Freedom is slavery. War is peace. Yes.
Just because I know how much your following loved us talking about Abby Chatfield and Clementine Ford.
Oh, didn't they ever? They turned into a bunch of whingers. They actually sounded like feminists for a second. They were whinging so much about that.
Can I just say, you have got some whingy people in your audience. Like, you guys whinge about everything.
They follow me for the politics. I love the fact that you bring the pop culture stuff. I love the fact that I get to whinge about you bringing the pop culture stuff. So I don't really get to judge my audience for being whingy because, let's be honest, I do kind of lead the way whinging about that. Pot calling the kettle black. But look, the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. That's one of the lowest performing segments that I have ever put up from our podcast. So I'm just going to say my audience and the pop culture stuff, not really a great mix.
No, they did not want to hear about that. But she did. I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about the fact she appeared on Piers Morgan, which is interesting for her. I was shocked that she agreed to do it, but we'll get into that.
I was shocked that he would even have her, but
I think it's interesting. We won't talk about it now. We'll save it. We've been diligent.
Save it up.
This just happened this morning, but Donald Trump was meeting with the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Sorry, I probably said that wrong. And it was really interesting. He made him watch a TV where he had the I can't remember what party it is talking about calling for white genocide. So
the ANC calling for genocide.
Yeah. So they're our segments. I'm sure there'll be more. But it's interesting. There's so much I want to talk about, but what I want to talk about from a 30,000 foot view for a second is just how bizarre all of these little grass fires are. Like we can sit here and go into the minutia of each one. But have a look across the world right now, what is going on? Like, talk about World War III. I think we're already there. This is a new form of warfare. There are so many things simultaneously happening all at the same time that you can't possibly focus on it all. And it's just when it all boils down to it, intolerance and hatred. It really is. And I know I sound like a leftist progressive saying that, but have a look what's happening in South Africa. Have a look what's happening with Israel and Palestine. Have a look what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. Have a look what's happening between the left and the right and the up and the down and the white and the black. Everyone is just angry with everyone. It's getting exhausting. And I'm wondering, as an accelerationist, if this is the beginning of the end in a good way.
All right, so let me agree with you and disagree with you simultaneously. Schrodinger's argument. So I'm going to disagree with you on the basis that this isn't actually new. What's new is that we're hearing in such detail about all of these things. It used to be you would hear, there's a war on in the Ukraine, and you would hear about it 3 months after it started because it finally crept its way into the local, newspaper or into the local gossip down at the local watering hole, the local pub. And you wouldn't get the images and the detail and all of these different conflicts going on. Most of it would just pass you by. And I would suggest probably life was better that way than what it is now, where we have instant access to every problem and every trouble spot everywhere in the world. But on the World War III thing, I do kind of agree. It was said a while ago, and I can't remember who it was, but I've never been able to forget what was said, which was that wars of the past have been powers versus powers. But that World War I and World War II, it was power versus power. World War III is going to be power versus people. And again, I sound like a lefty, jolly, progressive, blowhard as well. But fundamentally, what we're seeing is simultaneously around the world, certainly around the Anglosphere, but I would also include Europe, and then there's certainly other countries as well, a sharp increase in the government's desire to oppress their own people. And this is true of dictatorships and quasi-dictatorships, failed democracies, as well as what would be regarded as functioning democracies, like in Canada and I'm going to argue in Australia, because we've got some interesting stuff going on now that Anthony Albanese feels like the opposition have imploded. Things are going to get really worrying there. So we are certainly seeing a simultaneous, I'm not going to say coordinated, but possibly, but certainly simultaneous dramatic rise in the oppression of power those in government, those who hold the levers of power against those who don't. And that's happening in a coordinated fashion. And if you regard those as opposite sides of a conflict, then yes, what we have is already a low-grade world war emerging on every continent.
Yeah. Before we get deep into this conversation, I just want to bring everyone's awareness to the fact that we need you to share this podcast.
Yes.
I'm going to say it now while I think about it. But if I can ask you guys to, firstly, go and subscribe to the Oddcast HQ YouTube channel. We are very close to our first
800. Yes, we've nearly reached 800. We're rocketing along.
And we would really love it if you can invite more people to watch it. Every week we see it goes up, but we want to continue doing this. We want to bring more resources on. And the first thing I will be doing is hiring writers, like actual people who can help me get my head over all of this stuff, because it's impossible to do it on your own. Plus produce it, plus wrangle you. It's a lot of work. So
I'm so sorry. I'm part of the burden. Can I just say though, I have now discovered that my great cultural contribution, the thing that I will be remembered for all of posterity, won't be my political commentary and advocacy around water access for irrigators and farmers. It won't be my work during COVID. It won't even be my marbles video and my civics education work that I've done for the Australian public. Apparently, the thing that I'm going to be remembered for forever is going to be tangent time, tangent time, tangent time, tangent time. Apparently, that dance and that tuneless ditty is the thing that all of you, our beloved viewers, want on a T-shirt. Explain yourselves.
That is, and I am currently mid-design of it. And we're going to have hoodies and T-shirts, and we're going to do a pre-order, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
We'll do a pre-order. And the reason being, for all of you numpties who want to get in there and go, meh, 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 grifting, meh, 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 bleh, whatever you're going to say, you notice how many people of your audience don't like me? It's great. I just want to give them more ammunition.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So we're going to do a pre-order because we have no idea how many we're going to sell and also what bloody sizes you want. So we need to do the pre-order. And then that way we can sort of gauge what's going on. And then if you guys like them, we'll do more. That's the plan. But we need you to share the show.
Yep. Share the show. We will put up the design. Once the design is made, I'll put it up all over my socials. I'm sure Carly will do the same. We will talk about it in an episode, and we will put it up as just one of the products on my website so that you can go in there and pre-order it. We'll figure out with the suppliers what the supply delay is going to be in order to be able to fulfill that. I've told them, though, to brace themselves. I've told them to get ready because I'm really confident that we will sell at least 2 of them, one for you and one for me.
One for me.
Yeah. And I'm going to buy one for my mum as well. So they're bracing themselves for a minimum of 3 in that pre-order. Yeah.
Well, just to share some other good news, I bought myself a video caster yesterday. So you've got yours up there and I've got one here. And
I no longer have to travel with it in my backpack.
And G has hardwired everything. So we've got a new table on order. So every week, guys, we are making incremental improvements to this studio, but I'm also going broke because of it. So
yes,
please buy a T-shirt so I can replace some of the money.
well, not yet, because we don't have the design finalized and we don't have it available online, but we're letting you know, brace yourselves, guard your wallets, because we're coming for them. And now, can I also say another thing that we're working towards, which I'm finding actually way more exciting than I probably should, than makes sense for me to do, is having put all that work in and lovingly built that beautiful studio, we're going to be moving it sometime soon.
That would be great.
We're going to move it into a larger area where we can fit a guest in person to join us.
Yes. Are we talking about the extra room in our house, or are we talking about, are you hiring something I don't know about? Is this new news?
No. We're talking about the larger space in your house. I'm going to freeload for as long as I possibly can. I mean, unless you want to start coming up here, you can start coming up here to my studio every week. That'd be fine.
The reason I will never, ever come to your house is those huntsmen. Sorry, but never, ever.
Look, there are no Borises. It's too cold for the Borises. They've all headed north for the winter, and they'll be back in springtime. So this is a good window of opportunity for you to come on up here.
We are moving into a bigger space. Yes, we have a spare. What do you call that? A rumpus room?
It's like a massive, oversized landing area at the top of the stairs that
Yeah.
sort of doubles as a rumpus, I guess.
Yeah.
We're going to move in there, and we're talking in the next couple of months. We're not talking like straight away, but believe me, we are evolving the show, and we're going to get to the point where yes, we are having guests on and throwing extra people in as our victims.
Well, we've got competition with Avi and Rukshan now, and sorry, I just have to win.
They're no competition. Don't flatter them. Gosh, really, Carly? They're not
Avi's
competition
head's big
for us.
enough. But no, it's something that I'd love to do, have some people on. But should we start with Australian politics? Just because
let's do that.
so uninterested. Let's talk about the Nationals and Liberal coalition.
You're uninterested. Wow, Carly, you're going to get all excited
you know why
about
I'm uninterested. I'll tell you why. I'll give you my opinion, and then you can give me like your actual political analysis.
Yeah.
I just find it so uninteresting how low of intelligence our political leaders are, and watching them squabble and like just cringe through any interviews about this. There is no further like evidence that I can say than this disbanding that's showing how out of touch these Liberal Party people are. They only talk to themselves. They've obviously got the people, the backers, who are telling them what they want, which is so out of touch with the average person. And they're saying we need to adopt more of the left. We need to go more left. Are you joking? That's exactly what we don't want. And if all you needed to do was speak to one normal person that isn't part of the Liberal Party, and you would find where you're going wrong, but they just don't.
So the Liberal Party choosing Susan Lee as their leader was them essentially doubling down on exactly what you're talking about. They're saying that, Susan Lee has been deputy leader of the Liberal Party for quite some time, has been a minister for quite some time, was a minister for the environment under Scott Morrison, betrayed her constituents who are, include a lot of irrigators. She betrayed them by backing the government's water basin mismanagement, etc. I've been covering that in detail in videos for years. David Littleproud, who was re-elected as the leader of the Nationals, was the water minister under Scott Morrison. And he is someone that I have no time for at all. I consider him to be as slippery and slimy and unprincipled as politicians really get. He touts his country credentials. I'm from Burke. Well, actually, he's a banker from Burke. He's not a farmer. He's not an irrigator. He doesn't really have any sympathy or time for people in that line of work. But let me tell you a David Littleproud story. He was the water minister in 2019 when Scott Morrison got elected. He came in as the water minister, and I was working with a number of people campaigning for access to more irrigation water for farmers, particularly in the Murray-Darling Basin, where they're being destroyed by the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, which came out of the Water Act of 2007, which was in part a brainchild of who else but Malcolm Turnbull. Everything he touches turns to shit. So we put on a 2-day protest. It was on the 3rd and 4th of December 2019. You can look it up. We had about 4,000 farmers show up, and this relates also to the protest recently in Victoria to do with the CFA stuff. We had about 4,000 farmers show up. They had tractors and trucks, and Pauline Hanson was there and a bunch of others. And we staged a protest for 2 days. I was the MC of this event on the lawn of Parliament House in December 2019, remembering this is just before the world went mad. We had a delegation go in to negotiate with David Littleproud, and we were looking to get a release of some environmental water to increase farmers' water allocations so that they could keep their crops alive. And we sent a delegation in, and I warned them in advance. I said, listen, you got to understand how these guys work. They will say something that means nothing, but they will say it with a tone that makes you intimate the meaning. You think you understood them. They'll, for example, a classic one is they'll say, that's really interesting. I've never heard that before. And you think, oh, wow, that landed. He's listening to me. No, he just said nothing. He said he made no promises. There's nothing there. But they will leave you with this belief and this feeling like, oh, we're getting somewhere. And so I warned the delegation beforehand. I said, listen, this is the game they're going to play with you. They came out of the negotiation, and unfortunately, they had been sucked in, and they came out saying, yeah, we're going to get some water. And of course, then David Littleproud turns around and says, oh, I never said that. That was never a promise that was made. I listened to them. I told them that I was listening to them, and I heard them, and that's all. Yeah. And so David Littleproud then, I think it was about 2 weeks later, I don't remember the exact time, resigned as water minister and installed Keith Pitt as the water minister. And what that said to me, number one, was he never negotiated in good faith. He's as slippery and slimy as every other politician is. Two, even as someone who touts his country credentials, he doesn't give a rat's ass about country people. He was there to defend his party and his party's policies. 3, when the heat was on, and believe me, the heat was on him at that point. I won't go into the details, but the heat was on. I have an unconfirmed report that he specifically named me as someone that he wanted to back off as part of the negotiations. Now that's not a confirmed report, but that's my understanding, because I'd been making hit videos on him specifically in 2019, calling him out.
You'd have hurt his feelings.
I'm led to believe that I very much hurt his feelings, and he specifically wanted me to back off. He then resigned as water minister, and this is the game they play. The new water minister who comes in can say, look, guys, that was all done by the previous person. That wasn't me. You can't be mad at me. That was the other guy, right? So they diffuse the anger. And then they also say, listen, you've got to give me some time. I need a couple of months to get my head around what's going on, get up to speed, blah, blah, blah. So they steal your momentum. So simply reshuffling who the minister is a well-worn strategy for defusing social movements as they start to get momentum. So David Littleproud played the political game perfectly. He defused our negotiation team using all the same slimy tactics. And then he stepped aside out of that ministry portfolio. They installed Keith Pitt. They played their game. And of course, by the time we could have got anywhere with Keith Pitt, COVID had taken over and there was no oxygen for anything else. So I have no time for Susan Lee. I live in her electorate. I'm well aware of her background and her history. I have no time for Susan Lee. I have even less time for David Littleproud. And yet, according to the Liberal Party and the National Party, these are the best 2 people that they've got.
And it's the same with Labor, with Albanese and, Penny Wong. You look at it and you just go, this is why I get so frustrated with Australian politics. As much as it's important to pay attention to, I look at these people and go, this is like watching a creche. It's like watching little kids in a toddler's pit, just like, meh, 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 meh. That's what it's like to me. I just can't take them seriously. And there's no like structured, coherent thoughts come out of their mouth. It's all just platitudes. It's all just political babble. And, I was watching, not to conflate the 2 issues, but I was watching the CFA protest. And just that there is a huge, like, gargantuan hole between what the politicians think and what they say and what the average Australian is desperate for. And no greater example than watching the Nationals and the Liberals argue about key policies. They're arguing over things like nuclear energy, the supermarket, what's it called? The divestiture?
The divestment, divestiture,
And, the regional development fund and things like that. I'm like, hello, can we get back to the main issues, like our farmers struggling right now and all the tax that's squashing small business and the cost of living crisis? Like, we don't really care about your bureaucratic bullshit. We care about the stuff that actually impacts our day-to-day. And when I see the farmers, like, talking about, firstly, I know I'm conflating 2 issues, federal and state, but, the unrealized gains, that's going to affect a lot of generational farmers. And then you've got the drought in Victoria. They haven't had rain for a long time.
It's bad,
It's bad. No, when was the last time you heard them talk about a drought? I haven't heard a thing on the news about a drought. I remember growing up, drought was all we talked about.
Tragically, Australia is doing its classic thing where you go up to the coast of northern New South Wales and they've got 1 in 500 year floods, which were, by the way, predicted by David Burton, aka Inigo Jones. You will see interviews with me from the past, as well as I had him speak at my conference in Albury last year. So we knew this was coming. It's not climate change. This is to do with planetary alignments and their effect on the sun and the sun's effect on our weather. And yes, it's all there. You can go back into my video history and you can go back into Inigo Jones's or David Burton's history there. But droughts and flooding rains simultaneously. In Victoria, in the region where I live, they're in some of the driest conditions on record. You go north of here 5 hours by car or 10 hours by car, they're in some of the worst floods of the millennia.
Yeah. My issue with this whole climate change blanket statement, right? Like, oh, it's climate change. Sure. Whatever makes you sleep at night. But this is a mainstay of Australian farming. This has always been the case. Droughts, or floods.
Yeah.
And it's always been difficult. It's always been hard. That's why you want the people who know this life, who have lived this life for generations, to be the ones to tell you what needs to happen. And when you see these voices silenced, particularly like now, like everything's been swept under the rug because now we're talking about the destruction of the coalition. Once again, it's minimizing the voices of those who really matter just to listen to a bunch of brats just throw like insults at each other. It's embarrassing.
So
and what's worse is the media capitalizes on this. And that's all they talk. Oh, Susan Lay said this, David Littleproud said that. Hello, what about the massive, massive issues that are truly impacting Australian farmers? No one's giving that airtime.
So let me bolster your status as an accelerationist and validate that even more. And I'm not an accelerationist, but I'm heading that way. I got to say,
It's hard not to be at this point.
Well, I am a glass half full kind of guy, and it was funny. I was reading comments on some of my work, and I made a video about how Victoria is a failed state, and one of the comments was someone saying, "Yeah," and this is coming from Topher, who's normally a glass half full kind of guy. Like, sit up and pay attention if he's saying this. Yeah. And unfortunately, it does actually get worse because the Labor Party are kind of doing a victory lap at the moment, and they're hosting events, and the Prime Minister was there with his chief strategist. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the chief strategist got to do a speech and talk all about why they won.
Yeah.
According to him, according to the chief strategist of Anthony Albanese, the re-elected Labor Prime Minister, who presided over high inflation and a spike in a cost of living crisis that we haven't seen in my lifetime, they won because they kept the cost of living front and center, and because Australians trusted them to fix the cost of living more than they trusted the Liberal Party. Just if he's right, and he's the specialist in this, he just won a resounding victory in an election. By default, I'm going to assume that he knows what he's talking about until proven otherwise. If he's right that they won because they focused on the cost of living crisis, which they helped to create, then we are in way deeper trouble than I thought.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, I agree with you, but what worries me more so than that is, aside from the people who are quite politically engaged, the average punter looked at Peter Dutton and they conflated a few things like, oh, he's Australia's Trump, he's terrible, he hates women.
Which is not even close to true.
No, it's not. But you go and look, and for everyone who's like, oh, that's not true, that's not why I lost, go and read the comments, guys. That's what that's what you need to pay attention to. That's the average person. They're the ones who are making these decisions and voting. And unfortunately, like I said, those who are politically engaged is a very small minority. But, the whole Anthony Albanese thing, oh, he gets us. He grew up with a single mother. He lived in, public housing. He cares about people. Australians are so like, what do you call it? Stockholm syndrome? Gullible.
Stockholm
and
syndrome,
also,
we're gullible. We just swallow it.
I hate saying this, but it's pathetic because they're so dependent on the government. They want more government. Australians can't seem to reconcile with the fact that as the government has inflated, so have all our struggles. The bigger the government, the worse it is for us. No one seems to be able to make that correlation at this point. And they just keep going, oh, the government needs to do something. The government needs to do something. And if you go and read these comment threads, that's the general consensus. Oh, why hasn't the government done something? Well, that's the problem.
Let me take you through something that I took the guys through in the podcast that I recorded on Tuesday morning. It's called the Unemployables podcast. I believe they're banking them up and storing them up at the moment. So it'll come out in probably a month's time or something like that. But I went through with them what I believe is the single most important metric to look at when it comes to the cost of living crisis and whether it's going to get worse or whether it's going to get better. And I have touched on it briefly before in podcasts, so I'm going to kind of blast through it quickly, but I'm trying to improve my language around how I communicate this because I think there's something here. And if I can get good at communicating this, then maybe it'll have an impact. The cost of living crisis is caused by one measurable number, and that number is the gap between what an employee costs their employer versus the purchasing power they end up with once the government is finished with their salary. So take an $85,000 a year, which is roughly the median full-time Australian salary in Australia right now, $85,000 a year. By the time you add superannuation on top, running at what is it now, 12, 13, 14%, something like that, plus payroll tax at a state level if the company is large enough, plus some other fees and charges and costs around employment, that $85,000 employee is going to cost their employer somewhere near $95,000. So that's the cost that the employer has to recover in order to be able to afford to pay that employee to do that job. But the employee does not get $95,000 worth of purchasing power. They only received $85,000. Then from the $85,000, they have to pay payroll tax, which is going to take them down somewhere near $70,000, a bit under $70,000, somewhere in that ballpark. But now they're still not done because every single thing that they buy also has taxes applied to it. There's GST on most of what we buy. There's also fuel excise, tobacco excise, alcohol excise, and we're still not done because you have to add all of the government-related fees and charges, whether that be rates, which you pay even if you're a renter because obviously the landlord has to recoup all of that. through to all the pissy little stuff, driver's licenses and passport fees and, fishing licenses and all the pissy little stuff that we're paying out. And the big one that most people don't factor in is stamp duty on housing. On average, Australians, a house will change owners roughly every 7 years. It's actually getting faster at the moment. It's becoming less. And so every 7 years or so, we're paying a percentage of that house's property, of that house's value in tax to the state government. And again, even if you're renting, your landlord has to recoup that cost. That's an expense that they have to recoup. So you're paying that out through your rent. So every single one of us is essentially paying a house's worth of stamp duty every 7 years or so. And all of that is coming out of that $85,000 you get paid. Or that the median Australian full-time salary only gets paid. I did the maths on this some years ago for a video. And back then it was already true that more than half of your official salary is lost in taxes and cost of government. So you're being paid $85,000. Your actual purchasing power, if you removed all of the cost of government, the taxes, the fees, the charges, and so forth, is going to be somewhere around about $40,000. But here's where you see and you understand the sting here. The prices of everything that you are buying with your $40,000 have to be set so that the employers can recover the $95,000 per employee that they actually have to find and fork out. So at the moment, because of the cost of government, that gap, and I don't know, we'll call it Topher's gap or something, we'll have to find a name for it. The difference between what a median employee costs their employer and what that median employee is left with in purchasing power after the cost of government, that gap is the only metric that matters. And if we can reduce that gap, our quality of life will improve because our income will be able to afford our cost of living better. If that gap increases, which it does every time there's increased taxation, increased government spending, increased regulation, increased any of those things, every time we make that gap bigger, we make the cost of living crisis worse. And the reason why this matters is because it brings into sharp focus the fact that you cannot fix this with pay rises. You cannot go out there and campaign as an industry and go, we want to raise the minimum wage. Okay, but if you raise the minimum wage by $5, you raise the cost of that employee by $7 or $8. And of that $5 raise, you only get to the spending power of $3. So now all prices have to go up for a $5, $6, $7, $8 per hour increase in employer cost. That's how much prices have to go up in order for you to have an additional $3 in real spending power. You're chasing your tail. We cannot fix this any other way than by reducing the cost of government.
So I agree with you, and we've had this discussion before, but the bigger problem here is how do you get the average person to understand what you just said? Because I get it, you get it, people in business get it. As I said, when you go and check the temperature of the average Aussie punter and you look at people who have been influenced by, like, I know you don't want me to say it, but the Abby Chatfields, your punters politics, you go and have a look. These people keep saying the government needs to do something. Why isn't the government taxing the big mining companies? Why isn't the government holding the supermarkets accountable? Why isn't the government putting dental in Medicare? And so the problem is Australians are either politically and fiscally ignorant or at best, like, what's the word?
I would say willfully ignorant, blissfully ignorant.
Yeah, I don't even. The thing is, I don't think they're aware they're ignorant. Like, is that the Dunning-Kruger effect? Like, I don't know. This is the thing that I can't seem to make peace with myself, because like when I talk to people like you, I'm like, yeah, obviously, duh. Like this seems like common sense to me. But when I go and talk to your average person and they'll talk to me about this stuff and I say to them, like, have you considered this? And they're like, oh, well, no, I think the government should be doing something about it. I'm like, do you not see, like, pick a sector, the building sector, the agriculture sector, it doesn't matter. You have a look at how much red tape there is that stops anyone from firstly doing any innovation or growing or scaling. They can't do it. It makes it so hard. And just last week, we had this news story, I think you covered it in one of your videos, of this man who has a sandblasting business whose lands tax is now almost 6 figures. Like, it's an eye-watering $250,000.
It's over $200,000 in land tax from, if my memory serves me correctly, it was from less than $10,000 a year 10 years ago to something like 210,000, something like that.
What business can afford that? And the other issue is, and I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. Anyone that watches this podcast will be agreeing with us, but what business can afford to keep like absorbing these costs? You can't. What's going to happen is you're going to see an unemployment crisis happen because business is going to be shutting doors. Business has been shutting doors since COVID. And like in Melbourne, right? Like let's use the hospitality sector. We saw that with the increase of the minimum wage plus all the, what do you call it? The loadings, the weekend loadings.
Yeah, weekend and public holiday and everything else. Yep.
A cup of coffee in Melbourne is now about $6.50, if not $7, if you're not getting any like boutique milks or whatever, right? Like an average latte is about $6.50, not because the coffee's worth $6.50, because they put on their surcharges, Sunday surcharge, public holiday surcharge. And then, of course, you've got baristas who are getting paid $35 an hour to do a job that, like, literally 10 years ago, they were being paid $19 an hour. Their job hasn't gotten better. Their work ethic hasn't improved. They're not trying harder. They're just getting paid more to do less. So we're celebrating mediocrity. And this is something I'm super passionate about because I see this in entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs, and I see this in people I mentor. They don't have the discipline to push themselves out of mediocrity. Good enough is okay. And we have this in the education system too. You would have been familiar with the term P's get degrees. That's the Aussie attitude. She'll be right. This is what I work against every single day. What do you mean she'll be right? Why are we so hell-bent on accepting mediocrity in this country? And that's the problem. So like, I get what you're saying. Absolutely. I unequivocally agree. How do you get the average person who's sitting there in the doldrums with their suburban house and their 2 cars, mortgaged to the bloody nth degree, and then wondering why they can't afford to go on a holiday or why they don't have any savings? They don't seem to quite bring the two together.
Before I comment on that, can I just put a challenge to our audience? If Tangent Time was the inspiration for our first t-shirt, can we come up with something to do with ranting? Something like, because that was amazing, Carly. Like that rant, wow, full on, fantastic, loved it, spectacular, 5 stars, would see again. All right. We need to find a t-shirt. We need to find a t-shirt about ranting, and that's your one, the Carl's rant. I don't know. Audience, help me out here. You know what I'm talking about. We got to do a t-shirt for that. Yeah.
My frustration with the rant, right? And I think I've said this on the podcast before. When I have just a general conversation like this, I see people who believe that they're ideologically superior to me feel like they can quash me with a couple of platitudes and like key little sentences that they say, right?
Yeah.
The only way to get people to listen is to literally engage that spicy side of me. Like Charlie Kirk does it, Ben Shapiro does it, Michael Knowles does it. I don't pretend to be on the same level as those guys.
Sure.
But when you do start to get that runaway train rant, that's when people kind of go, oh,
okay.
You know?
But that is a law of nature. That is burned into our psyche from whatever the origin of it is. That's burned into our psyche. So, Carlz, you can not like that's reality, but you're never going to change that's reality. And if you're good at rants, and rants are the way that people connect, then maybe you need to lean into it rather than objecting to it.
Well, it bloody works. It worked in COVID, apart from the fact that, what happened next. But it worked with burnout car. And this is the thing. I fight against this all the time because I don't want to be known as the ranty person, right? But whenever I do those friggin' rants, they work. It gets people to listen. And like, not to keep bringing up the same thing, but 40 million views. I obviously said something that made people listen, right? The burnout car, people were like, yes, what she said, and it was
then
gone
the car got
3 days
removed.
later.
Yep.
I'm not saying I did it, but I'm pretty much unequivocally saying I did it, But anyway.
Yeah. But let me come back to what you're
punter.
Yeah, let me come back to that because again, I don't like my evolution towards being an accelerationist, but I'm just going to be honest about where I'm at.
It's warm in here.
Join the dark side. Do you have cookies?
Well, yes, we have snacks.
All right, then I'm in. Actually, you've got sourdough. I know that. So you look, I'm in the dark side. No, I unfortunately have met most Australians when I was in Venezuela. And it was quite shocking. This is why
we need a Venezuelan t-shirt too.
Yeah. I bring it up in pretty much every
down
episode.
in Caracas.
Yeah. I saw Australia's future in Caracas. I went to a pro-government protest in the central square of Caracas City. And it was a pro-Chavez. I mean, Chavez was dead by then. Maduro was in power, but they were still doing big pro-Chavez stuff. And they had TV screens with Hugo Chavez's old speeches playing. Big propaganda everywhere. And we're talking about, for those that may not know, we're talking about a complete failed economy. Their inflation was running in the tens of thousands of % per annum. Malnutrition was a massive, forget the poverty line. A huge proportion of the population was below the malnutrition line. Their children had pot bellies, Africa, World Vision ad in Africa style, right? Their kids looked like that. This is a country that had been the richest country in South America only about 20 years earlier, and had been among the richest countries per capita in the world about 120 years ago at the same time when Australia was right up there. And they have had a spectacular fall from grace in the most just devastating, the human cost. When you see it, it's awful. And I go to this pro-government rally and I'm thinking, how can there be a pro-government rally when this is their reality? How can they be pro-government? How can they want more government? How can they be celebrating government? And I watched these people lined up in the city square, and I had someone, a minder with me who was keeping me out of trouble. And I had to make it very obvious, by the way, that my wife and I had to make it very obvious that we were Australian, not American.
Yeah.
We had to really front foot that fact.
Yeah.
And they had an anti-American, they had a couple of mascots running around, a big shark with an American flag who sort of represented the evil of America that was just, that was opposed to Chavistas and the socialismo of their era. And so I'm watching all this play out, and my translator buddy, Minder, is helping me to have conversations with people. And I start talking to people who are lined up to get T-shirts. They're lined up to get T-shirts. And these aren't commemorative T-shirts like what you would get at a music festival. These are just T-shirts. They've all got slogans on them. They've all got pro-government slogans on them. But these are just generic T-shirts. And they are taking off the T-shirt they're wearing, throwing it in the bin, and putting on the T-shirt they're being given. And through the translator, they're saying to me, oh, we're so grateful to the government for giving us this T-shirt, because without them, we couldn't afford to buy a T-shirt for ourselves. Right? Yeah. So when you say to me, how can they not see it? I know how much further it can go and people still can't see it. And I know people personally, people in my life, members of my family, extended family and friendship group, who I look at and go, that's you. You will go all the way. You will be begging, you will be thanking the government as their boot crushes your head. You will be thanking
$5 a week tax decrease.
And I don't know what to do about that.
I saw a similar in Cuba. Cuba's far further along than Venezuela. And Cuba, like, I have been to 72 countries now. Cuba is the only country I couldn't get out of quicker. Not because I was unsafe. I just want to make that clear. It was just such a hard place to be. Everything was 10 times more work. Plus the heat, obviously it's in the Caribbean. But everything in Cuba, like, it was convoluted. It was difficult. To be fair, I was there in 2018 or 17. Okay. So Obama had lifted the embargo, but I think it was like coming back. It was a weird time. So to be fair, Cuba may have changed. I was there, just shy of 8 years ago. But like, for example, they turned the water off at night. So after 9 o'clock, you couldn't flush the toilet. You couldn't brush your teeth. In your hotel, you can't do that. There was no actual restaurants. The restaurants were all run in family homes, and like, it was an unspoken thing. Like, yes, that's the restaurant. Like, you didn't know it was a restaurant. And that's how the locals made their money, because the government takes 90% of everything that they make. The tobacco farmers who work their butts off making the cigars that you get to enjoy, they get 10% of all of their output. The government takes everything. And so when you go to the tobacco farms, they try to get you to buy cahibras that have no labels on them, because at least that money goes in their pocket. And then, everyone romanticizes Cuba. You think of the Malecon, right, with all of the vintage cars. Like, it's like a Monet. All I can think of is Site Inspector is like, good from far, far from good, right? And it's true. That's what he says. You know what I'm talking about? Good from far, far from good.
I know. I've heard him say it.
That's exactly what the Malecon is. And I mean, when you walk into my house, you would see those 3 massive pictures of Cuba, and they're displayed in a triptych for a reason. One's the Cuba, the postcard that we know, and 2 is Havana at its heyday, and the 3rd one is like what Cuba actually looks like that no one wants to show you. And so, for example, I want to paint this illustration. We see that postcard. We see the beautiful sunset over the Caribbean Sea. We see the Malecon with the vintage Chevys driving past. But when you get up close, The only thing that's original about those vintage cars is maybe the body, with like 60% of it is like that auto bog, right? The wheel is not a Chevy, it's or Cadillac, it's a bloody Kia, or it's some Russian import that I've never heard of that I can't pronounce. Every part of that car is somewhat MacGyvered together, and they barely run. They're always smoking out. They're always breaking down. And you got to think, this is like the middle of the equator. It's bloody hot. There's no air conditioning. And you know, when you see that, that's what I say. Cuba was hard because everyday life was hard. Like, you know, there was no internet. Now, to be fair, you could buy, and it may have changed. So just to be fair, if it's changed, I don't know. I haven't been there since. But you used to get this little bit of paper, and you go to what they'd call like their convenience store, and it was $25 US for, I think it was 500 meg, that you had 20 minutes of internet time, right? Like, it was insane. And that was back when I was like in my little Instagram posty phase. This is, you know, where I wanted to be on social media. And I couldn't. You just couldn't open it because you'd use 500 meg in a second. The only thing I could do was go there, and you had to stand under like whatever the cell tower was. You couldn't be in your hotel room. Pardon me. Sorry. You had to be literally close to the tower. And what was happen is like there was like 50 Cubans all around, and those little bits of paper were just littering the floor. And like, you know, after a concert, the confetti, that's what it looked like. And it's like that every day. They don't clean it up. It's just like piles and piles, these little coupons, and people sitting there on their phones. And that's Cuba. Sorry.
I'm mindful of the Michael Moore documentary where he tried to talk about healthcare, and he went across to Cuba. And what he was trying to do was show that free healthcare in Cuba was so wonderful and everything else. But even he's a hardcore lefty, and he's very willing to be very deceptive, in my opinion. I think a lot of his work is very unrepresentative of the truth. Even despite that, he couldn't hide the fact that the hospital room they're standing in had cracks all up through the walls, and they didn't have a lot of basic equipment. I mean, he's standing inside very sparse spaces and rooms, and there's no doubt that his trip there, he would never have been allowed to go in there with a film crew, etc., without it being organized and approved by the government, which means that what he was allowed to see was the best.
Yes.
They put him into the best spots, right? He wasn't seeing the reality for the poor person on the street who, quite frankly, wouldn't have even got healthcare in the first place. This was the best they could manage for a staged a media opportunity through one of the biggest documentary makers in the world. And it still, despite that, looked really, really awful.
At the risk of drubbing this home, sorry. I was gonna say I just want to tell you this really quick story. I'm not trying to waste everyone's time, but like whenever I travel, I go to the tourist things because, you know, you see that, oh yeah, seen the Eiffel Tower, whatever. But in Cuba, I was like, I want to see Cuba, and I originally had a trip to go down the East Coast, like past Guantanamo, all the way back around. I think it's called Venetian or something like that. And I didn't end up going because I just didn't feel safe. I got robbed at one point, like, you know, pickpockets or whatever. Anyway, I met these two Cubans, and of course, I knew I was about to get scammed. That's how they make their money. But I was like scammed in a good way, in the sense that, you know, they befriend you, and then you end up paying for all the drinks and the food. I was like, I can cop that. That's fine. And they were a youngish couple. They would have been around my age, and they're like, oh, we can take you to Old Havana. We can take you to like the cool spots. And I was like, you know what? Take me to like where there's salsa music playing. And so they did. They took me to actual Cuba, their Cuba, and it was dark, it was dingy. But what I do like is, like, you know, they're resourceful. They've been able to take what they have and make something out of it. And again, you can romanticize that. You can go, wow, look what they've been able to do. They're only doing that because they're living in abject poverty, right?
They would swap.
They wouldn't be doing that if they had a choice.
Yeah. If you're looking at them going, oh wow, how beautiful, swap with them. Swap with them.
Yeah,
they will
100%.
trade with you in a heartbeat.
100%. And like, we're sitting in this bar, and I mean, I don't drink alcohol, but they bought mojitos, and I had a couple, and, you know, whatever. They were like, rocket fuel. Anyway, don't screenshot that video.
Audience, you know what to do.
I got a lazy eye, so this one goes really in. Anyway, so we, you know, sitting there drinking mojitos, and I looked at the glass, and it was Corona beer bottle that they'd obviously like cut the top off, and they were the glasses and things like that. So they've been able to repurpose things. And the problem is, the left will go, oh, isn't that great upcycling? Isn't that great recycling? Well, no, it's just what you do when you have nothing else. And everything that they were telling me, they were like, you know, we have to rely on tourists coming back and smuggling things in for us. And like you said about Venezuela, condoms or Band-Aids or just small commodities like that they just don't get access to. And when you speak to an Australian progressive, right, when you speak to someone with a bleeding heart, which is unfortunately half the Australian population, they go, oh, but, look what they're able to do. Honey, they ain't got shit. They're doing the best with what they have. And I'm telling you now, if they had the opportunity to do something else, they would take it.
Yeah. It's not look what they're able to do. It's look what they have to do. It's just in order to get by.
All you have to do is just this is what shuts people down. Okay, so tell me, why aren't Australians and Americans trying to illegally migrate over to Cuba and Venezuela?
Yeah.
Why is it they want to come here?
Let me bring this back to Australia and Victoria. So we've talked sort of federal politics, the split of the coalition. Very bad news. They're already under pressure to rescind that. Personally, I think that the fact that David Littleproud went through with it is probably evidence that he only won the leadership battle against Matt Canavan by a very slim margin. I suspect he's under a lot of pressure internally to keep his leadership spot for the Nationals Party. I'll be watching and reporting on that. I actually have an interview with Matt Canavan, all going well. I'll be interviewing him tomorrow and releasing that probably over the weekend. So I'll be certainly looking deeper into that and reporting on that. We've talked about Anthony Albanese and the fact that he seems to think that he won because they focused on the cost of living crisis, which he's largely responsible for. Now, Victoria. We saw the CFA protest. Now, for those that don't know, the fire services levy is jumping up massively. This is a levy that supposedly helps to pay for fire protection, but actually in rural communities, the rural communities are largely volunteer doing all the work themselves, and they're also the ones paying the levy. And so they're sitting there going, well, hang on, if we're the ones showing up, if we're the ones volunteering, if we're the ones actually going out and fighting the fires, why are we suddenly having to pay so much more? We're not getting twice the equipment. We're not getting twice the technology and firefighting gear to work with. That's all staying exactly the same as it was before. We're the ones that show up. Why are we paying twice as much? And I think that's a fair question. But the deception in Jacinta Allan's statements, as well as Jacqueline Symes, the treasurer, the deception is they're saying there's no new taxes. What they're doing is they're radically ramping up the existing taxes, and they didn't announce the new taxes in the budget. They had already announced them previously. So they announced a whole bunch of new taxes over the course of the last year or last number of months since Jacinta Allan won. We've had a whole bunch of new taxes, but because they announced them all before the budget came along, they can say, well, there's no new taxes in this budget. Well, yeah, because you already got them out there on the table. They're also simultaneously trying to claim a budget surplus, but also showing in their forward estimates that the state's debt is going to ramp up massively. And this is to do with a number of accounting tricks, to do with off-budget spending and a whole bunch of other stuff that they love to do. The bottom line is, if Anthony Albanese got re-elected because he focused on the cost of living crisis, and if Jacinta Allan is going to win politically and benefit politically from these kinds of blatant lies and deceptions, then I'm sorry, Australia. I'm sorry, Victoria. The hour is later than even I thought it was. I am really, really alarmed by not just what I'm seeing our politicians do, but by the completely apathetic response that I'm seeing from my fellow Australians. And I'm going to come back to Venezuela one last time and touch on something I've talked about before. Again, I met there someone who tried everything to save Venezuela from itself, but didn't make plans to protect his family from the consequences. It's like a man who's trying to patch up a hole in the bottom of the ship, but is surrounded by other people bashing new holes in the ship. There comes a point where you just go, you know what? I got to get my family off this ship because I can't patch these holes fast enough. There's nothing that I can do. I do not want to say this, but I am beginning to be of the opinion that there are too many Australians running around bashing new holes in the bottom of this ship.
I agree. I've been, I never thought I'd conflate this to politics. I've always looked at this from a more entrepreneurial point of view about just how uninspired, and I hate saying this about Aussies. I am an Aussie. I love Australia. I like being Aussie, but how genuinely apathetic and lazy Australians are. I'm not saying everyone, so don't get your knickers in a knot if it's not you, but the majority are. They just like, as a culture, that's our thing. We were laid back. I don't think it's laid back. I think it's lazy. And you see that because they want the government to step in and do stuff. Oh, I think it's great that the government's going to half own your house so that you can get into the housing market. Are you listening to yourself? Do you know what you're saying?
And no, they don't know what they're saying.
No, but the problem is, right, like you look at the headlines and I like just trying to, maybe this is my academic brain, but I look at like what people are saying versus the headlines. And for example, they'll announce, the debt, this, that, the other. No one cares. When they announce the national debt, the average person's like, not my debt, don't care. Australians are in more debt than most people anyway. So to them, they're like, this is business as usual.
So
they talk about the state debt. Sorry, go.
Let me put that in perspective. The debt per Victorian is 4 times higher than the debt per Californian. I'm talking about state debt.
It's like $80,000 or something?
Per Victorian is 4 times the per person debt in California. So when I say that Victoria is the California of Australia, in some senses, I'm actually insulting California. It's actually way worse.
And not only that,
and to your point, no one cares.
No, and that's why we've got the immigration that we do. They need more people. Obviously, they're trying to get more tax out of people, but no one can sort of seem to. Yeah, of course they are. But like, I went into the city the other day, right? I went into Melbourne. I was doing a fashion shoot, and just walking around my favorite parts of Melbourne. You know, the top end of Spring Street. I don't like Parliament House, but I love it from an architectural point of view. It's a beautiful building. So it's the Treasury building. We're shooting around there, and I took photos, and I was like, Melbourne, when you can sort of look through rose-colored glasses, is still beautiful. But then sure enough, like, there's homeless people where I've never seen homeless people before. There's Decay where I've never seen Decay before. And I just feel so sad because we're watching it in real time, yet no one cares. Like, everyone's just walking around it. Like, there was a guy, Parliament Station near Treasury. There was a homeless man sitting there, all like sort of sprawled out, shit when I say shit, just junk, like all of the crap he collected, dirty, grimy shit. And he'd sort of splayed himself out like in front of almost the staircase. And what do people do? They just walk around. That's the Aussie way. They just go, meh. Yeah. It's like the burnout car. That's our mentality.
And this was the most shocking thing about Caracas, is that if you looked up from the footpath, it looked like Melbourne. It was beautiful. Ornate buildings, period, classic architecture.
Cuba.
Beautiful. Yes. So look at Cuba. Now, Cuba's got more peeling paint than what Melbourne does. But this is why I came back from Venezuela and said, guys, we're not special. If we do what Venezuela did, we will get what Venezuela got. Because when you go to Caracas, you see Melbourne. You look around, you go, I'm in Melbourne right now, until I bring my eyes down to ground level, and there is a lineup of people that have been waiting since 4 o'clock this morning in the hope of getting into a grocery store, and the hope that the grocery store might have some butter or some eggs. And on the other side of the street, there's a guy in a suit on his way home from work dumpster diving, because his job, which he's one of the lucky ones to have a job, still doesn't make him enough money to be able to afford to bring food home to his family. And it's that juxtaposition that shocks you and makes you realize, hang on, we are way more vulnerable than we think we are.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to keep talking over you.
No.
All I can think of is that expression, bread and circuses, which is exactly what we're getting. So you think of the average Aussie, they lean more left than they do conservative, unfortunately. But the government, state, federal, local, whatever, will appease them with little platitudes, right? For example, let's take the LGBT thing. They're going to paint a bunch of walks for 70,000. Is it 70 or 40? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Either way, a lot of money.
70,000 for 2, I think.
Yeah, so they're about 35, 40,000 each.
Something like that's what my memory says, yeah.
They're painting crosswalks in rainbow colors, and people of the north think this is progress.
When you say north, you mean the northern suburbs of Melbourne, yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you now have a pretty colored crosswalk, but now you have an injecting room right next to a primary school. You have decay in your infrastructure. You have taxes going through the roof, but hey, at least you have that very pretty rainbow crosswalk. That's what I mean by bread and circuses. The Australian government is really good at going, oh, here's this like one little issue that was bothering people. Give them that, and we'll go across here and just make everything else fall apart.
Don't make me quote Tolkien. Don't make me quote. Why do you make me quote Tolkien all the time? Childless lords living in high towers musing on heraldry. Childless lords, in other words, people that have no vested interest in the future, in the outcome, in the long term. Living in high towers, they are detached from the concerns of the everyday people. Musing on heraldry, they are worried about symbolism and seeming rather than actually doing. Painting crosswalks in rainbow colors for $35,000 each is a function of childless lords sitting in high towers musing on heraldry. Tolkien called it 100 years ago.
The other thing is too, and like I don't want to upset half your audience, because this will upset half your audience, because I imagine quite a lot of them live rurally. When you go and talk to the average inner city Melbourne, I mean, I don't go up to Sydney much. I don't know if they talk the same.
Sure.
But the average Melbourne person, when you talk about rural, they're like, yeah, they need to pay tax. They've got all that land. They need to put more houses on their land. I'm like, excuse me, I'm gonna swear, block your ears if you don't want to hear it. Where the fuck do you think all that fancy fucking hipster food comes from, you dumb cunt? Where do you think you get all that beautiful, like, amazing hipster fucking food that you eat? It comes from those rural people who you look down on with disdain, whose land you want to sell off to put more houses on it. How the fuck do you think us as a nation will survive if our farmers go broke? And I just want to put this into perspective, right? They are talking oh God, I'm getting really upset just saying this out loud. But they are talking about the increase, sorry, the what am I trying to say? The unrealized gains, right? And a lot of generational farms have their super tied up in that, right? And then there's all this discussion like, well, they need to let go of the land if they can't afford it. And so, like, just to be an accelerationist, all right, let's even just 25% of our farming, half of it's owned by China anyway, but let's say another 25% of Australian farms gets taken out of their hands and handed back to people. We're seeing this happen literally right now in a separate way in South Africa. They're talking about giving the land back to to use their word, the blacks and the South African government. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever in our history, in our recent enough history, seen a era where land was taken off from the farmers who fed the nation, and what happened next? Can anyone, has that ever happened before? Can anyone remember?
I'm just going to say one word: Zimbabwe.
Yeah. What about the really big one? Happened this last century.
Oh,
Stalin?
okay. Well, we're talking.
Anyone?
Yeah. We're talking Stalin and the Holodomor. Yeah.
Right. Like, what happened there? Like, it was famine. It killed 30 million people. Like that. Like, that's more than the current population of Australia. You know, like, I don't think people, like, this is the thing. I think the history's too far away now. Like, people don't want to look at that. Oh, that's
why I mentioned Zimbabwe, because that is in our lifetime. Zimbabwe is in our lifetime.
Topher, what Australia knows about Zimbabwe? Literally. I know, and just to be fair, you people watching this, okay, great. You're like this many people. How many subscribers have you got? 80,000 people. Cool. The population of Australia is what, 27 million? Great. You are one person of the tiny minority of people who may be politically aware. This is your problem. You think everyone knows what you do. They don't. That's why these podcasts are important.
I've got it. I've got your slogan, your T-shirt.
Ranty finger t-shirt. Pointing?
No, it's wake up with spicy Carlz.
Don't make me wiggle my finger at you.
All right, listen, I'm pretty sure we promised G a little while ago that we were going to be more like happy and positive in this podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like we've done a great job of that, this podcast.
Well, let's go into some depravity.
Oh, excellent. Even better. Yeah.
Even better. Do you have any idea what's going on in the Diddy trial? Any idea at all?
Honestly, not really. This is kind of the stuff that I focus on the things where I think I can bring value. And that usually is things where I have some level of insight over and above just what I read in the media. So something like the Diddy trial, I have no insight above what I read in the media. So I kind of just let it pass me by. However, it sounds like you're going to bring me up to speed.
I am. So the reason these things matter is Diddy and Bad Boy Entertainment, his big company, they are currently being charged, he is being charged with racketeering, so criminal enterprise. So under that, you've got extortion, kidnapping, interference, all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, but besides that, he's a great guy. Just besides those things, put them aside, and he's a great guy.
Besides the criminal enterprise, then you have
the kidnapping and stuff,
sex trafficking. He's on 2 charges of sex trafficking.
He's a great guy besides that. Yeah.
But what I'm just going to summarize with the opening statement from his defense team. We know that Diddy is a domestic abuser. We know he is a debaucherant, depraved man. But that's not what he's on trial for today. What he's on trial for is whether he broke the law doing what he did. Right? That's his own defense team. That's their opening statement. The reason this Diddy case matters, it's no different to Harvey Weinstein or Jeffrey Epstein. They are all very similar. Well, maybe not so much Jeffrey because he wasn't really culture. Diddy, the rap industry, Hollywood, sets the tone for culture. He is, whether or not you like it or not, maybe not Diddy's music himself, but Bad Boy Entertainment,
the label,
Tupac, Notorious B.I.G., like all of those guys started what was a massive cultural movement, right? And then, you know, people still think Diddy killed Tupac. That's why his name is Diddy, right? And he's like, he's on the record as saying, what would his last words be? I did it. That's what Diddy said. I did it.
Yeah, wow.
Is he referring to Tupac? Who knows, right? And so for your audience who has no idea what I'm talking about, you're talking about someone who was at the head of culture for 30 years. This is the guy who's influencing your children and your children's children, what they watch, what they absorb, where they get their information from. The entertainment and music industry is a massive carrier pigeon for all of that propaganda that's been shoved down the last two generations' throats. Now, I'm millennial. I grew up in the 90s. I grew up thinking it was cool to sound like a gangster. And then obviously you grow out of it. But now you have a look at these youth crime, right? I'm not saying that youth crime was directly correlated to Diddy's rap music. That's a really easy thing to say. But have a look at what is celebrated, what we see in movies. We have become so desensitized as a population. We see murder, death, decay, destruction on your average like nightly show.
Yeah.
Like prior to like 20 years ago, that was R-rated content. So now it's so
apart from Murder, She Wrote, she was always there.
Yeah. Did you ever see like the gore in that though?
No, that's true.
Yeah. I remember 2005 watching Saw and not understanding how that movie was made. I thought I was watching a snuff film. I was like, like that was the first jarring movie I watched where I was like, wow, I can't believe they're showing me a guy like trying to hack his ankle off with a hacksaw. But so the whole Diddy thing, right? You got to think like he is the head of this industry, aside from maybe like, you know, your Jay-Z's, Beyonce's. These are big global mega stars. These are people who set the tone for the industry. So for 30 years, whether or not he was actually running a criminal enterprise, will we wait to see? Allegedly, you know, just so I don't get any lawyers at me. How can someone like Diddy operate for 30 years unchecked in plain sight? He hosted his freak-offs in hotels like the Intercontinentals and the Hiltons and like the prestigious Four Seasons hotels. He had every celebrity of note there, from Oprah to bloody Barack Obama. What's his name? Barack Obama.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that no one knew what was going on? No one wanted to speak about it? Okay. Why did no one ever speak?
But there's an important distinction here. It is absurd to suggest that no one knew. It is also wrong to suggest that just because someone went, they must have known, right? No. There is a point at which, so I directed a short film that made it into the finals of Tropfest in January 2013, I think it was, that was the showing of Tropfest. It was called The Hustle, 7-minute long film. And I went. And then, of course, after the Tropfest, there's the after party, which, you know, all the filmmakers and everyone gets to go along to. And there were some high-level celebrities there. And that was the first time I was confronted with segregation within a room like that. You think, oh, I'm going to the after party. It's going to be great. You know, we're all going to be there. No. You don't get to walk past that curtain, right, into the special area for the you're only the director of one of the award-winning films. You're not actually an important person. We let you in here because you add to the atmosphere and the sense of exclusivity, which the celebrities get to really enjoy and the people we want to butter up get to really enjoy. Now, let me be very clear. I do not believe in any way, I have absolutely no reason to believe that anything untoward was happening behind the curtain. But what I saw was it was entirely possible for someone to be in that forecourt, to be in the event and have no idea what was happening behind the curtain, to have no idea what was happening inside other rooms around the place. And once you kind of see it, and that was the beginning of my journey away from wanting to be involved in the entertainment industry in that sense. I walked away from acting and directing and everything not long after that, was because I suddenly had a context in which to see just how bad things could be behind closed doors and how I could easily become a fellow traveler, how I could easily have ended up in some of these rooms. You get an invite to a Diddy party, everyone's going to be there. Oh, cool. Sounds good. If you're naive, you go, you attend, and then you find out later that there's all these awful things happening behind closed doors and you naively contributed to what was going on. So I think it's really important that we don't burn everybody down.
No, of course not.
There is a lot of room for people to have not been aware. But I think also we need to hold people's feet to the fire and say, well, those of you that were close to Diddy, especially those of you that profited from being close to Diddy, you've got some questions to answer now.
Well, so there was an 11-year relationship between him and Cassie Ventura, right? Sorry, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to turn the notifications off. You'll have to deal with the buzzing. Sorry, I also work for a living. But yeah, so his relationship with Cassie, and it was filled with domestic violence, and people. And this is the thing. This is where things get really tricky. They're like that. His defense is saying she could have left him at any time, and as we know, under coercion, under bribery, under threats of physical violence, there is always a part of you that's going to be like, I don't think I can leave. I don't know if I can leave.
Yeah.
And,
Coercive
having
control.
coercive control, right? And so what's happening, she's one of the star witnesses, his ex-girlfriend, and she's talking about these freak-offs. Now, Diddy is a cuck. Do you know what a cuck is?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the term, yeah.
Right. So I don't want to go too far into the really depraved sexual stuff because it's pretty dark. But essentially, like really, really like niche, kink, gross stuff.
Yeah.
And so now what you've got on trial is all of this sort of stuff coming out about what it really takes to actually make it, right?
Yeah.
And you got to think,
be accepted into that inner circle.
And you think, right, the average mum and dad who sees like talent in their young kids, like, yes, like we'll get you there. You've got it. You can make it. We're going to make you a star. And if you've got any like little shred of musical talent or acting talent or anything like that, yeah, of course you want to get there. You want to be like at the Academy Awards. You want to be like the Australian Margot Robbie who makes it. Now, I'm not saying that Margot Robbie goes to a freak off, by the way. I'm just saying like that's where you want to get to. That's what you dream of. And when you realize it's not necessarily your talent that ensures that you make it to the top of Hollywood. It's actually your participation in what can only be described as like weird satanic rituals. And as you know, I'm not a massive religious person, but I do think there is evil in this because it is so depraved.
There's stuff going on. And you just need to look back now with a fresh lens on some of those videos of Justin Bieber not long after he was kind of being discovered and, he's being given all these things, etc. Now, I'm not alleging Justin Bieber was or was not involved in any particular thing. I don't know. I have no insight. I said that at the outset of this segment. I have no insight besides what's in the news. But when you see that now, with more of an understanding of what was going on at that time in the industry, you have to start to ask yourself some serious questions.
Look at Britney Spears. Like, I mean, you know what really, really gets my goat? Like, it's cheap shots to have a giggle, right? Like, you would have seen some of the videos that Britney Spears has been putting up. It goes around, social media. She's lost her marbles. There's no coming back. She's whatever they did to her, she's done. You saw it happen to Michael Jackson. You've seen it happen to Kanye West. You've seen it like Justin Bieber is very much spiraling at the moment. And like, it's easy to separate them because they're celebrities. They've got money. Why do I care? Well, they were once like you and I, and sure, they might have money, but what was the cost of attaining that money? Who knows? Like, none of us will ever know. I don't know if they'll ever be open enough to speak. But I think there's certainly the curtain is falling on Hollywood. I mean, it has been for years, but when they say don't see behind the curtain, I think we already are. Like your megastars, like your Beyoncé's. Like I remember there was a story about how she wins so many Grammys. They're bought. Sorry, they're not. She doesn't win them on merit. Not to say that she's not talented. But there's a level of like, well, the Grammys are obviously going to Beyonce because we're saying it will go. And what really bothers me is that we want people to try. Like you have me on this podcast saying like, don't be mediocre, actually try. But then you see what happens when you're in the upper echelons of any industry. It's depravity. It's worrying. And I worry because it sets a tone for the younger generation that's normal behavior. And I mean, like not to conflate these issues as well. Like I'm sort of talking all over, but I feel like it all plays in. Look at our obsession, not yours and mine, but our obsession with porn in modern day. Like how we now have OnlyFans models becoming celebrities, like basically prostitutes who will do the worst of the worst. I'm not going to bring up Bonnie Blue, but I just did. Whoops. But they're now like, it becomes aspirational content to a younger generation who can't see any path forward to actually obtaining wealth like that. You see Bonnie Blue going into all these designer stores, buying all this luxury gear. Your average young girl goes, well, I want that. Maybe I'll do that.
So my audience who do also watch this podcast have now well and truly fallen asleep. We've spent long enough on culture war stuff. And also, contrary to normal, where we can go for 2.5 hours and that's completely fine, I only have 15 minutes left and it's a pretty hard limit. Otherwise, my wife's going to miss out on the start of her pamper day.
All right,
and
I'm
I
going
will be
through the notes.
in a lot of trouble.
Okay, God, there's so much to talk about. All right, let's go through the James Comey. This can be a short one. James Comey posted on his Instagram 8747, 8647.
8647, yeah.
And it was just like a collection of shells making out the numbers 8647. And he posted it going like interesting shell formation and then claimed total ignorance that he didn't know what 86 meant. I'm sorry.
So most people won't know what it means. So you need to go through that.
Okay, so 86 basically means 8 foot long, 6 foot deep, as in a grave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gangster speak. So 47, obviously the 47th president of the United States, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so 8647 is basically calling for assassination.
Yeah. Now, Comey has said that he didn't know what the 86 meant. All right.
Which, what's more alarming, the former director of the FBI not knowing colloquial slang like that, or like, I don't know. I just find that really worrisome.
But more to the point, Comey, you'd better have a really good explanation for what it did mean in your opinion, for what you did believe that it meant. Don't just say, I didn't know it was referring to a grave. Okay, then what did you think it meant? Because it's an arranged group of shells. What did you think it meant?
And you went to the effort to take the photo and post it.
If not actually arrange the shells yourself.
And so obviously he got a visit from the Secret Service, and so did Bryan Cranston. He posted something as well, or Ed Cranston, one of the liberal progressives. And interestingly, like, again, I come back to this like degradation of culture that we're openly calling for people to die. Why does that not alarm people? You know, I opened with talking about the South African party calling for a white genocide. We've got people talking like, kill those people. Why do we want people to die? When did this become part of the like regular speech? Oh yeah, well, let's just kill them. You know, like that decay really worries me.
Yeah, and look, and so it should.
Do you know I'm ranty?
Why?
I
Why are you
haven't eaten
ranty?
properly. I've had half a bagel, and the rest is sitting there off screen.
So what you're telling me is it's all my fault. That's
what I'm saying is like, it's cold now, and I don't want to eat it.
You poor thing. First world problems. Suck it up, princess. We'll be done in 15 minutes.
All right. Okay. So we've talked about the tax levy. I think you've done it. So if you ever want deep dives, Topher does do deep dives on the more interesting stuff, not the culture war stuff.
On the more political stuff. I don't touch the culture stuff myself. I get dragged into it kicking and screaming by Carly, who gets perverse pleasure out of watching me suffer.
Yeah, I do. Okay, this is a short, sharp one. Did you catch any of Clementine Ford on Piers Morgan?
No, I did not. I am proud to say I have successfully avoided that up until right this moment when you're going to drag me through it.
She went on Piers Morgan and she was asked, of course, she got the gotcha question. I can't believe she didn't think she'd get this though. Piers asked her, what is a woman? And the first thing that she says is, I'm not going to argue about trans women with you. Trans women are women. And then it just descended from there. And there was a guy on there, I can't remember, I think it's Andrew Wilson or Andrew something. And he is known for going on that whatever podcast and just like absolutely taking down feminists.
Destroying. Yep.
And it was a bloodbath. And I'm not going to lie, a little part of me was like,
I'm amazed that Piers invited her on. But from all accounts, from what I'm hearing, I'm very glad that she was dumb enough to accept.
Good for ratings. Piers is a media man. It wasn't Piers the editor of the Daily Mail, or is he still the editor of the Daily Mail? Like he's a tabloid guy.
Yeah,
he's a tabloid guy.
Yeah, he knows how to talk.
Yeah, he just wants to do YouTube clicks, man. Like as we said last episode, there's a really easy way to build an audience, and that's how you do it. That video's gone mega viral. So, what? We've talked about that. Okay, two things left. James Biden, Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis, or just happening this morning, Donald Trump meeting with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yeah, look, both are interesting. I think we can, how long have we got? We've got 10 minutes left. We've got 11 minutes. All right. So very quickly, Joe Biden, cancer diagnosis. My first thought was, he's reached the limit of his usefulness and they're getting rid of him. You know, the cancer's in his bones. He'll be dead in a week. But apparently what they're saying is that even though the cancer's in his bones, that it is responsive to treatment. So I may have been a little too cynical in my first initial thought process.
How does one recover from stage 5 cancer where it's metastasized in your bones? I don't think you can recover from that. That's a death sentence.
Yeah, look, it's a death. I mean, he's old. He's, we all have a death sentence hanging over us, and his is closer than most of ours because as a function of his age. But no, I mean, from what I've read, they're saying that it should be fairly responsive to treatment, etc. And but I can't help but be very cynical of anyone who's concerned about his health now, who wasn't speaking up about his health and his evident decline in health while he was the president of the United States of America. It's kind of pick one. Are you worried about his health? In which case, where were you? Yeah. Or if you weren't, then how dare you pretend that you care about him now?
Interestingly, I saw a compilation on X just before we started the podcast of Peter Dookie from Fox News saying for anyone who thought we didn't ask, here's like a compilation of all the times I did ask. And what's her name? Kerry John Pierre, I can't remember, KJP, just shutting Peter Dookie down every time. Sorry, I get everyone's names wrong. Whatever. I treat everyone equally.
It's in the morning.
Haven't eaten that bagel. I'm looking right at it. Shooting him down, saying, "Oh, this is a lie. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Everything's," and basically throwing cover for Biden. They did know, and they refused to acknowledge it. And I think what's worrisome again is the American people, the average punter, again, has been lied to, has been fed blatant propaganda, and no one seems to really care. They're like, "Oh no, you can't. We can't talk about this now because it's terrible. This old man's dying, and we need to show our heartfelt,
show some respect." Yeah, there is a certain hard-nosedness that is required in times like these to not have that emotional blackmail silence you. It's a very, very easy thing to have that faux compassion and to take that morally superior position based on your faux compassion for someone's terrible, heartbreaking circumstances. But the bottom line, where were you? Where were you all this time? How dare you now pretend like this is such an important thing?
You would have heard Jake Tapper from CNN has written a book about the Biden cover-up.
Yes. Yep.
That comes out. I think it comes out today, actually. And interestingly, Megyn Kelly had Jake Tapper on there. Obviously, he's doing his publicity rounds for his new book, and he knows he's going to make a fortune out of it because that's how you grift, guys. But Jake Tapper is a major anchor on CNN and covered a whole lot of the Biden presidency and actually threw cover for Biden himself. And Megyn Kelly, in the best way possible, showed him videos of him saying, you're lying. This is not true. How dare you say this about the president? And he was just sitting there like a stunned mullet going, oh. Yeah. Like, do people not remember that the internet's forever?
Yeah, apparently not. Apparently not. So, look, people like you and I can't change that. We just have to sit back and enjoy the show.
Yeah, I just wonder, and this is why I keep coming back to saying to you guys in the audience, you're like, oh, we know this. We know. Yes, I know you know, and you're morally superior, but can you do me a favor and share this podcast with people who don't know, so maybe they can learn something? Because that's what we're trying to do, break out of the echo chamber, which, by the way, is why we talk about pop culture, because it brings in a bigger audience. Saying.
Yeah, and I hate it as much as you do, audience, but unfortunately, Carly's right. It's necessary, and it helps us to reach people who aren't already in our echo chamber. So suck it up, princess.
I think because if we go into the South Africa stuff, I'll get really dark. So we're not going to talk about that. Maybe we'll push it to next week because it's only just happened. But just in the spirit of what we're talking about, and this is I thought how we could round out this podcast because I love talking. Is the reason we talk about this stuff. Yes, we could talk about the politics all day, every day. That's what Topher does. But that really eliminates a huge part of the audience who we need to reach. Like we need more people to get engaged. And politics, unfortunately, can be incredibly dry, which is why the average punter is so apathetic to politics. The last thing people I don't want to talk about Susan Ley from the Liberal Party. I couldn't think of anything less I want to talk about. I know it's important, but it's bloody dry.
To be honest, I don't want to talk about her either, but it's necessary.
You got to bring a dose of humor. You got to bring a dose of interesting stuff. For example, the Abby Clem thing. Sure, like I don't want to talk about Clem Ford all bloody day, but there are people who are interested in that, and that's how you invite them into a podcast and lure them with like the little pop culture trap, and then they might stay and learn something. So shut the hell up and stop whinging.
All right, we have shouted at our audience a lot this podcast. So can we make a promise, Carly? Next week is nice week. Not that the topics are going to be nice, but that we are going to be nice to our beloved, beautiful audience who we love and appreciate very much.
No, we love our audience. This is what happens when I don't eat. So moral of the story, feed me before I do a podcast.
Right, so as of next week, I'll be back in studio. We will be recording later in the day. I will double check and confirm that Carly has eaten before we begin.
Have we got 2 minutes to go through comments? Sure. Have we got 2 minutes?
2 minutes. Literally, yes.
So, we do have some really lovely comments, by the way. Like, I just you know, I call out some of the crappy ones. But if I pull up the Oddcast HQ, just want to say thank you. I didn't know people can also comment on Spotify. I was just told that a little while ago. So, yeah, so I was reading some of the comments on that, but I'm going to pull up this episode. Oh, that's you. We don't want to hear you talk. Shush.
Been enough of that already.
Yeah, a lot of people, like I said, wanting the Tangent Time t-shirt. So there you go. Lots of people saying, can we talk about the CFA thing? So I think you have done that. The movie you were talking about was called Jewel, directed by Steven Spielberg, the truck car movie that you talked about.
Okay, Jewel. Yes, Jewel. Yes, it was. In fact, yes, I remember now.
People saying we love the podcast. This is great. So yay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Interestingly, there was a comment, and I just want your reaction. I'm just going to read it to you.
Right.
We need a balance between capitalism and communism/socialism. We don't have to be 100% one way or the other. Political fluidity, I call it. Your response, please.
Incoherent. Sorry, but that position is incoherent. You understand neither communism nor capitalism if you think they can coexist. And if that is your position, I would suggest to you that when you use the word capitalism, you probably think of corporatism, which is essentially what we have today. We don't have a capitalist system today. We have a corporatist system today, which is where corporations and government get into bed with each other, and through the use of government regulation, or essentially the threat of force to control economic behavior, which is what regulation is, they protect the big boys in town. So true capitalism is simply the free market. True capitalism is what happens in a schoolyard when one kid turns up with a peanut butter sandwich that he doesn't want, and some other kid has lollies that he's sick and tired of eating, right? And they trade with each other. This is what happens and emerges naturally when two nomads meet in the middle of the Namibian desert, and one of them happens to have something that the other one wants, and vice versa, and they trade with each other. It's what emerges naturally when human beings find opportunities to meet each other's needs. That's capitalism. What you're probably thinking of, if you think that capitalism and communism can coexist, what you're actually talking about is corporatism, which is a halfway step towards fascism, which is essentially the identical twin of communism, just in a slightly different dress. So I would say that comment is incoherent, and that you need to spend more time understanding what capitalism actually is.
Yeah. So further to that, we've had this comment a couple of times, but I'll read one. Huge fan of this podcast and learning so much from both of you guys, truly. Thank you for having the courage to share openly and sincerely. You're both inspiring me to do the same. Also, I know Topher was joking. However, some kind of reading list of books that Topher considers to be must-read would be absolutely amazing, in my opinion. How about the Oddcast book club? Which I like that idea, because I'm a nerd and you're a nerd.
I like that idea. I've thought about doing a book club in the past, and I haven't because of the time commitment involved. But hey, let's see how this evolves over the next. When we get to our first birthday, let's put a pin in that one and have a talk about it when we get to our first birthday, which, if I can drop a little teaser right at the end here, just as I have to sign off, you and I, Carly, are talking about our first birthday being a live event in front of a live audience. So maybe the question for our audience this week is, if in about 6 or 7 months' time we were to do a live Oddcast in Melbourne somewhere, would you want to come along? Would you come and see us live?
Absolutely. And maybe we can just put up a little reading list. We can just drop some names next week. We'll come up with a list of books together.
Sounds good. You and I will put our heads together. I have to run. So Carly, take us out.
Please follow us at the Oddcast HQ, which is where you're probably watching this. But please, if you haven't, subscribe. There is a lot of you who watch who don't subscribe. So we're looking at you. And also the wiggly finger.
The wiggly finger.
Follow Topher at
Topherfield. At Topherfield. Literally, it's that simple on all of the socials.
And follow me at Carlz J Soda. And we shall see you in the next one.
Ciao.
We did that sync. That was great. We did. That was great. Go on.
There you go.